Johnny Depp walked onto Stephen Colbert's stage dressed in his signature layered scarves and tinted shades. The audience roared in excitement, some even rising from their seats. Stephen welcomed him warmly, the usual glint of mischief in his eye. "Johnny, you've played pirates, monsters, even a man with scissors for hands. Is there any role you won't touch?" Johnny smirked. "Yeah, politician." Laughter erupted, but as the questions turned deeper, something shifted. "You've had, let's say, a turbulent few years," Colbert said, peering over his glasses. Johnny leaned in. "I call it living." Stephen chuckled. "Some might call it courtroom drama." The room's energy dipped. Johnny smiled, but his jaw clenched slightly. "Funny," he said. "I thought we were here to talk about my work, not relive tabloid fodder." Tension began simmering under the studio lights. Stephen pressed forward. "Well, the public's curiosity doesn't stop at the script. It's hard to ignore the headlines, especially when they dominate news cycles." Johnny crossed his legs, his voice calmer now. "And yet, those same headlines rarely tell the truth," Stephen responded lightly. "We just ask the questions here, Johnny." But Depp's expression hardened. "Right, you ask the questions that entertain, not illuminate." The audience sat still, unsure of how to react. Colbert tried to regain footing, smiling. "I think people just want to know the man behind the madness." Johnny exhaled sharply. "Then maybe ask something real instead of pretending to be curious while feeding the circus." The tension rose as Stephen said, "It's just a conversation." Johnny leaned forward. It's theater dressed up as sincerity." Colbert shifted uncomfortably in his chair, aware the tone had moved into unpredictable territory. "You've always been known as someone who plays by his own rules. Do you ever worry it alienates people?" Johnny tilted his head, studying the host. "Do you worry about hiding behind a desk and a monologue that's done?" The crowd gasped softly. Stephen, quick to deflect, chuckled. "Ouch." "Well played." But Johnny wasn't laughing. "You invited me here to talk about my new film. If this is about ambushes, I'm in the wrong place." Stephen responded with a measured tone. "No ambushes, just dialogue." Johnny shook his head. "This isn't dialogue, it's ratings bait." The crowd was unsure whether to laugh or remain quiet. The air felt thick now, unpredictable. Trying to salvage the moment, Colbert changed the subject. "Let's talk about the new film. Critics are saying it's your best performance in a decade." Depp nodded. "That's because I got to be left alone to do the work." Colbert smiled. "Freedom's a beautiful thing." But Depp wasn't softening. "It is, until people start telling you who you are, what you've done, and what you should apologize for on their shows." Stephen took the hit in stride. "You've always been a rebel, Johnny." Depp's response was swift. "I've just refused to be edited into something comfortable." The audience murmured again. Colbert looked down at his notes, unsure whether to keep the line going or cut to commercial. Depp caught their hesitation. "It's all right, I'm not afraid of silence." Behind the cameras, producers exchanged glances, weighing their next cue. Colbert tried another pivot. "Do you think Hollywood has forgiven you?" Depp laughed a cold, hollow. "Forgiveness implies guilt. What I've lived through isn't something I need to be forgiven for." The host nodded slowly. "Fair enough." But Johnny didn't stop. "What I've needed is the space to speak for myself without being cross-examined under the pretense of curiosity." Stephen raised a hand as if to interject. Johnny cut in. "And I'm not talking about courtrooms, I'm talking about rooms like this." That landed hard. A few audience members clapped awkwardly, unsure if it was appropriate. The mood was now officially uncomfortable. Colbert forced a smile. "Well, I can promise you, no judgment here." Johnny tilted his head again. "No, just questions designed to poke the bear. Then you pretend you're surprised when the bear growls." Stephen laughed nervously. "So, you're calling yourself a bear?" Johnny grinned for the first time in minutes. "Depends on who's poking." The audience laughed, but it was tense. Colbert leaned back. "I think the audience came here for stories, not sparring." Johnny nodded. "Then stop swinging." The comment drew gasps. The silence stretched. Stephen glanced at the teleprompter, but the crew didn't cut. They wanted to see where this went. Realizing the interview had spiraled, Colbert attempted levity. "We could talk about hats. You're famous for those." Depp gave a dry smile. "Let's talk about masks instead." Stephen raised his eyebrows. "Oh," Johnny leaned in. "Everyone here's wearing one. Some just hide behind a smile and a spotlight." Colbert didn't respond. The audience sat frozen. Johnny continued, "We create illusions for a living, but the real illusion is pretending this is all harmless fun." Stephen said quietly, "You've made your point." Johnny nodded. "I tend to." The band didn't dare play. This was no longer entertainment, it was confrontation dressed in velvet. A long pause followed. Then Johnny stood abruptly. "I think we're done here." The room gasped. Colbert reached out. "You don't have to go." Johnny ignored him. "You invited the chaos. Don't flinch when it arrives." He took off his mic, laid it on the desk, and walked off stage. The audience didn't know whether to applaud, gasp, or stay silent. Colbert stared into the camera, visibly rattled. "Well, folks. That was Johnny Depp." Awkward laughter. "We'll be back after this." Cue commercial. But backstage, panic. Producers scrambled. Social media exploded. The walk-off was already trending. Within minutes, hashtags surged. Depp storms out. Colbert clash. Talk show meltdown. Fans were split. Some called Johnny unprofessional. Others praised him for confronting a media system that capitalizes on scandal. Clips of the moment spread across platforms. Commentators rushed to weigh in. Was it justified? Was Colbert out of line? Was Johnny spiraling or standing tall? Memes followed. One particularly viral tweet read, "When Johnny Depp walks off, even the cameras flinch." The media frenzy was in full swing. And the actual film Johnny came to promote, its trailer hit 1 million views in an hour. In the days that followed, Johnny remained mostly silent. He posted a single image on Instagram, a stormy sea with a caption that read, "The weather changes, I don't." It went viral. Meanwhile, Colbert addressed the incident briefly. "Sometimes the table gets too hot," he said. "We're here to talk, not torch." Applause came, but it was cautious. Critics analyzed the segment frame by frame. Some defended Stephen's tone. Others pointed to a pattern in his interviews with controversial guests. Depp, they argued, just finally pushed back. Celebrities chimed in. Helena Bonham Carter tweeted, "Johnny's been through hell. Maybe let the man breathe." On the other hand, some journalists criticized Depp's defensiveness. "If you can't take the heat, don't go on late night," one wrote. But fans disagreed. They saw a man tired of being cross-examined for public amusement. Depp's refusal to play nice had struck a nerve, and for many, it made him more human. Authenticity, even when volatile, was preferable to polished PR acts. Studio executives took note. Future interviews with Depp were approached differently and more controlled, more respectful. His next appearances were with quieter hosts, podcast-style formats, where the vibe was conversation over confrontation. His image began shifting again from scandal-scarred star to rebel truth-teller. The Colbert clash had reshaped his narrative, not as a victim, not as a villain, but as a man done being managed. Depp had stopped playing along, and in doing so, he'd reclaimed his story. Stephen's team adjusted too. A few episodes later, his monologue touched on the importance of tone. "Comedy," he said, "isn't cruelty in disguise." It was a subtle nod to the Depp followed. His writers began including less jabs, more nuance. The shift wasn't drastic, but it was noticeable. And viewers respected it, because whether they agreed with Depp or not, they saw the moment for what it was: a collision between fatal dissection 8 and frustration, between performance and pain. Months later, Johnny reflected on the moment during an independent interview. "It wasn't planned," he said, "but I was tired, not angry, just done." He added, "We've made careers out of pretending to be people, but sometimes we forget who we actually are." That line resonated. It was quoted, shared, even engraved in fan art. For once, Johnny wasn't a character. He wasn't a punchline. He was simply a man drawing a line in the sand, and that honesty stuck. Today, the Colbert clash is still talked about, not because it was explosive but because it was revealing. It exposed the fragile nature of celebrity, the media's hunger for narrative, and the thin line between curiosity and cruelty. Johnny Depp walked off a stage, but what he really walked away from was the act of being dissected for sport. And in doing so, he reminded everyone that sometimes the boldest move isn't shouting, it's standing up, saying nothing, and leaving the stage behind.